Hello and welcome to another Writerly Witterings. I've got to say thanks today to my daughter because not only have I got a cup of tea, I've got 2 homemade biscuits as well. Or for all the Americans around, cookies. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about researching books because I've had some questions from people who have said, one delightful student who said, could you give me any hints about a book that I can buy that will teach me all about medieval England, because I want to write about medieval knights. Somebody else wrote and said, can you give me a book that would highlight all of the things that happened during Bloody Mary Tudor's reign? And the simple answer is no. But you can see here I've got 3 piles of books, at least I hope you can see them all. This one is my to be read and reviewed section. Very good. The most interesting one currently is this, which is taking quite a lot of my time. I've also got to write a foreword for a friend of mine, so I've been given a bunch of Susanna Gregory's books so that I can revise how it was that her early books started. So I've got to write a foreword for them. That'll be fun because she's an excellent writer and I love her dearly. But then if you look at this pile here, this is the standard go-to pile of books that I've used to create Rebellion's Message. These books, I haven't read and absorbed every single section on all of them yet, but there's books on spying, there's books on nighttime and how nighttime comes in, there's books on roadways. There's a dog has just run in and she's running out again. That's nice to know. Dalmatians, very small brains. Then there's books on Thomas Cromwell. There's books on how Tudors used to fight. I've got 2 other books down here on fighting and medieval combat. There's books on seafarers. There are basically books on everything. That's all well and good. But then the latest book, which I'm just finishing today, literally today, is all about the First Crusade. So when you start thinking about the Crusades, you start thinking about the Knights Templar, you start thinking about the Hospitallers, but actually they were after the First Crusade. So for the Crusades, I've got all of this lot as basic research, starting from brief summaries of Crusades. I've got books on German history, French history, seeing justice, castles, different types of warfare. The Itineraries of William Way, fascinating book actually. It tells you all about the different types of currency and all the different principalities going all the way through. Rule of the Templars, naturally, you've got to have that because the book's leading into the Templars. Then there's Armies of Heaven, there's the story of Roger of Sicily, Dungeon Fire and Sword of the Templars. The Kiss in History, quite an important book. You may not have thought of it, but it is. Defending the City of God, Byzantium. There are so many different aspects of life that you've got to think of, because when you're writing about a period, you're inventing, recreating the cities, the villages, the towns, the way of life of all the peasants. You're thinking about how people would have gone to get medicine. You're thinking about herbology. I've got all of my herb books and plant books are over the far side of the room. I'm not going to bother trying to show them. It'd be impossible. I've got books on law. They're over there and over there. I've got books on the justice system, every aspect of life you can possibly imagine, even down to how apothecaries used to open shops. That's up in the top left over there. There is no single book you can buy which is going to teach you everything that you want to know about a particular period. Now, does that mean you cannot start writing a book until you've absorbed every single word on this pile? No, you can start writing the book tomorrow. What I tend to find is that as I'm writing, I get through huge amounts of pages of paper like this, because what I'm doing with my notepad is dropping a pencil. What I'm doing all the time is making notes of the things that I don't know enough about. So I'll write everything down on a sheet of paper, and then later on that day I'll go up and research it. Or sometimes, as I'm writing, if I need to exercise my legs, I'll get up, I'll go and find the book I need that's relevant, I'll pick out the data from that. You can't absorb everything in 1 month because you want to start writing a book in a month's time. My books on the Templars and Baldwin and Simon took probably a grand total of 40 years to research. I was interested in the Knights Templar, I was interested in Knights in Armour, and started reading up about them when I was a very early teenager. That's where my interest came from, which is why I started writing about that period when I started writing in my 30s. But it wasn't a case of doing a quick bit of research, okay, now I can write a book. I was firmly grounded in that period from all of my researches over the previous years. Now, I'm probably one of the world's greatest nerds on the early 1300s in England, but that doesn't make me an expert, it just makes me someone who's fascinated by that period, and Edward II. So, if you want to start writing a book, start making notes about what the period is you're interested in, start thinking about characters, start thinking about locations, start thinking about a basic plot line. You can always add subplots later. Just have a straight line story. And if you're really, really keen, do what I'm about to do this afternoon when I've finished this video, which is write 2 pages, a story. I normally start off with a 1-sentence summary of what this book is going to be about. From that, I'll write a 2-page summary, a 2-page synopsis, and I'll have a pretty good idea by the end of 2 pages whether the story's got legs or not. Now, the current book I'm thinking about writing is a much more recent book. It is historical, but it's 100 years ago. It'll be crime-based, it will be an exotic location, and it will be probably quite violent, although it will have amusing anecdotes to throw in as well. But with that, that's going to take 2 pages to summarise the whole thing, and then as soon as I've got that, it's going to be whizzed off to my agent, and we're going to see what he thinks of it, and whether he thinks it's got legs as well. If he has, we might even be able to sell it to a publisher just on the basis of a 2-page summary. And that is what writing's about. It's having the ideas, starting off with a synopsis, and then go and do the research when someone's paid you to go and actually think about the book. That's the better way of doing things. Unless, of course, you're doing it purely for fun, which is no problem. But if you're doing it just for fun, be aware that's why you're writing. If you want to write professionally, the best approach is to have access to as many books as possible. So go and visit your library, go and have a look at any of the old second-hand bookshops that you can find that have got old books that tell you a little bit more about history in an interesting manner. Have a read of some of them, get a feel for what it is you want to write, start writing, and as you're writing you can always check up for more information. The one thing I would say is, these books are all books that have been published. They have been checked by an author, hopefully. They've been sent to a publisher, which means they've been okayed by an editor. The editor has sent them to copy editors. The copy editor will have checked up certain facts. They will have gone, because they're non-fiction, they will have gone to fact checkers. If you work with some of the bigger publishers, they'll have everything checked with 2 fact checkers. Other publishers will go to only 1 fact checker. Once it's gone through all of that stage, it'll go to a proofreader who will check everything, and the author will check the proofs as well. So it's gone through 6 or so different stages before it actually gets into print. If you find something on Wikipedia, discussing it with a friend of mine, Ian Mortimer, a little while ago, we cannot use Wikipedia because it almost guarantees that there are no primary sources. Ian corrected a few details on Wikipedia, and he is told that he wasn't allowed to correct them because he was an expert in his field. Wikipedia depends on the fact that non-experts put information up, so you can't trust any of it. If you look at other information on the internet, there are no fact checkers on that either. So it is basically, if you look at Wikipedia, you're running the risk that you've got pure garbage. There was one book I was writing that had a fascinating piece of information about a specialist battalion in an army. It was really fascinating, it was really useful. I wrote it into my book because I'd checked it on Wikipedia, and I thought that must be sound, because on Wikipedia it had a whole bunch of notes at the bottom which gave the sources. I started checking the sources before I sent the book off to the publisher, and discovered that all of the sources came back to one source that was a pure fiction book. All the data on Wikipedia was garbage, basically. I could not use it. So I had to delete that chapter and a couple of other sections and invent a whole different series of pieces of information for it, which was frustrating and very irritating, but it was a salutary lesson. I've always said in the past that I won't trust Wikipedia or the internet generally, because you can't tell whether it was written by a professor or a spotty youth who's never been to school. These things, however, are checked. They are hopefully correct. They're more likely to be correct than anything you find on the internet on a percentage basis. So that is that. Now, having said all that, I've got a synopsis to write. I've got to finish the last scene on this book. I've got a cup of tea to drink, and I'm going to get on with it. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.